As an ambitious woman, are you ready to pull back the curtain and acknowledge the truth? Here it is. The version of you that got you here isn't the version that will take you forward. You got where you are because you had to survive. Survive the growth, the pace, the rapid evolution of the ladder you climbed. But the harsh reality is that survival identities can build success, but they can't build freedom. You can be disciplined, driven, resilient, and still feel trapped inside the very persona that once protected you. That's why awakening feels disorienting. It's not just the exhaustion. It's not just the restlessness. It's the quiet realization that the mask you've been wearing is too heavy to keep carrying. Think about how these survival identities form. Maybe you became the overachiever to earn love and approval. Maybe you became the fixer to keep the peace. Maybe you became the strong one so no one could see your cracks. And for a time, those roles worked. They protected you. They gave you structure. They helped you climb. But here's the cost. What once protected you eventually imprisons you. Because when the role becomes an identity, you forget who you are without it. And that's when success starts to feel hollow. Let's be honest. Letting go of who you had to be to survive is terrifying. Because if you're not the overachiever, who are you? If you're not the strong one, who shows up? If you're not the fixer, what happens when things fall apart? That's why so many high achievers resist this part of awakening. Because it feels like death. The death of an identity you've relied on for decades. But it's not death. It's release. And release is what creates room for rebirth. Here's where spirituality becomes non-negotiable. Because strategy can't guide you through identity release. Productivity can't. Even therapy sometimes can't. Because this isn't just mental. It's spiritual. It's the work of remembering your essence beyond the mask. The part of you that isn't defined by performance or perfection. The part of you that existed before you had to prove, fix, or carry. When you reconnect with that essence, you stop leading from survival and start leading from authenticity. So what does it look like to let go? It looks like allowing discomfort instead of running from it. It looks like sitting in silence long enough to feel the grief of the old identity fading. It looks like asking deeper questions. Not, how do I succeed? But, who am I becoming? Not, how do I prove my worth? But, what truth wants to be expressed through me? This is the work that turns exhaustion into expansion. Because every identity you release returns energy you didn't even realize you were using to keep the mask in place. And here's the paradox. When you finally let go of who you had to be, you don't lose strength. You gain it. Because authenticity requires less effort than performance. Presence requires less effort than perfection. Alignment requires less effort than proving. Survival roles are heavy. Authenticity is light. And when you shift into that lightness, leadership becomes magnetic. because people can feel when you're no longer hiding. This is why spiritual growth matters for ambitious women, because you can't lead whole while carrying fractured identities. You can't model presence while performing exhaustion. You can't create safety for others while abandoning yourself. But when you reconnect to your soul, when you let it inform your leadership, you stop leading from survival and start leading from sufficiency. That shift changes everything. Meetings feel different, decisions feel different, the energy of your presence changes because you're no longer striving to be someone. You're being who you already are. Here's the truth about letting go of survival identities. It isn't just mental work. It's energetic work. Survival roles live in the body. They live in the tension in your shoulders, the clenching of your jaw, the way you hold your breath when you're under pressure. That's why you can tell yourself 100 times, I don't need to prove myself anymore, and still feel the urge to overperform. The role isn't only in your mind, it's wired into your nervous system. This is why spirituality matters here, because spiritual practices don't just shift your thoughts, they shift your state. They remind your body that it is safe to release, whether it's meditation, breath work, prayer, or simply 5 minutes of stillness. These tools interrupt the survival pattern that says, keep carrying, keep fixing, keep proving. They replace it with the truth. You're already whole. And something remarkable happens when you engage this way. The very energy that was tied up in keeping the mask in place gets freed. The vigilance, the tension, the exhaustion, it starts to dissolve. That energy doesn't disappear. It returns to you. Suddenly, you have more clarity, more patience, more presence. That's not weakness. That's power finally being redirected back to its source instead of being siphoned off by survival roles. So letting go isn't about abandoning responsibility. It's about reclaiming energy that was trapped in roles you no longer need. And when the energy comes back to you, you don't just feel lighter, you lead lighter. And people can feel the difference. Not because you announced it, but because your presence has changed at the root. So let me ask you this. Where are you still wearing the mask? Where are you still carrying the old identity that helped you survive, but no longer helps you thrive? Where is your soul asking you to release? Because the truth is this: you don't need to abandon everything you've built. You don't need to walk away from your career, your family, or your success. You simply need to release the roles that were never meant to define you, so you can lead from wholeness, not from habit. Here's the vision. Imagine leadership where you don't have to prove your worth, because your presence communicates it. Where you don't have to carry everyone, because your alignment inspires them to carry themselves. Where you don't have to perform strength, because your authenticity becomes the anchor. That's what happens when you let go of who you had to be. You stop surviving success and you start embodying it. So the next time you feel the old roles pulling you back, pause, breathe, remind yourself, that mask kept me safe, but it's not who I am. Thank it, release it, and step forward lighter. Because the world doesn't need another strong one who is secretly exhausted. It doesn't need another fixer who never rests. It doesn't need another achiever who feels empty. It needs you. Whole, aligned, authentic. That's the leader your soul has been waiting for you to become. If this resonates, subscribe. Share this with another ambitious woman who's tired of surviving and ready to lead free. And come back every Friday for more spiritual tools for soul-led living. Because the future of leadership isn't built on survival roles. It's built on authenticity.